She stood alone in the freezing wind, her hands tied behind a steel pole, the rough cord biting into her skin. 3 soldiers walked back into the barracks laughing as if nothing had happened. They didn't know who she really was, but someone else did. And that someone was already on his way. What city are you watching from today? If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe for more real stories about extraordinary people. Her name was Sarah Nolan. She didn't talk much. She arrived 2 weeks earlier as the newest reinforcement at one of the Army's most intense training bases. To most of the soldiers stationed there, she looked like a quiet, fragile woman who barely spoke, kept to herself, and avoided confrontation. In a place where ego was currency and loud voices ruled, silence was often interpreted as weakness. But Sarah Nolan was not weak. She had lived through more combat deployments than most of the barracks combined. She had served in war zones so classified they never made the news. She had trained soldiers who would one day command large operations. She had been part of missions that history would never acknowledge. But she wore no special insignia. She had requested a clean entry, no rank displayed. So she wore the humble insignia of a low-enlisted soldier. And she carried no medals, no ribbons. Just a standard uniform and a calm presence. That calmness made some uncomfortable. The barracks was filled mostly with young soldiers who were confident, talented, but inexperienced in the realities of the world. Among them were 4 men who had built a reputation for trouble. Corporal Riker, Specialist Gomez, Specialist Turner, and Private Holt. They were not evil men. They were just typical of many who had never learned the difference between confidence and arrogance. And they liked to pick targets. Quiet people made easy targets. At first, Sarah let their words slide. Whispers behind her back. Jokes in the dining hall. Sarcastic comments during drills. Nothing she hadn't seen before in different uniforms, in different countries. She had learned long ago that the loudest people often knew the least. But then things escalated. One morning, the training platoon was ordered to run over 9 miles through dirt trails covered in ice and mud. Most soldiers cursed under their breath. Sarah simply nodded and began stretching. She kept pace with the fastest runners and stayed silent, her breathing steady, her eyes focused ahead. Some noticed. Riker and the others did too, and they didn't like what they saw. When the platoon reached the final checkpoint, Sarah crossed 5th out of 52 soldiers. Not amazing, but impressive for someone they believed belonged at the bottom. She did not boast. She congratulated the others and kept to herself. But her success only fueled the resentment building in the troublemakers. Later that afternoon, the platoon was practicing weapons assembly drills. Sarah completed her rifle breakdown in less than half the posted standard. One of the instructors raised a brow. Another soldier muttered a curse of disbelief. Riker clenched his jaw. Holt shook his head in annoyance. Turner smirked and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. Look at her, trying to be special. She thinks she's better than us. Sarah heard it. She just continued working. Silence was her shield. But silence, to some men, looks like surrender. And they mistook her calmness for fear. Word spread quickly through the barracks. The quiet woman was performing better than many expected. Some soldiers admired her. Others rolled their eyes. But the 4 who had already decided they disliked her began a new mission, proving that she was weak, unworthy, and undeserving of respect. They started small. They hid her canteen before physical training. They switched her footlocker padlock with one that didn't match her key. They intentionally dropped her gear during inspections while pretending it was accidental. Sarah said nothing. One night, while soldiers were resting after hours of drills, Gomez leaned against his bunk and said, "Low but venomous. Tonight she's going to learn how this place really works." The others laughed. Private Holt looked uneasy. It was one thing to play practical jokes, another to humiliate a fellow soldier. But Holt was the youngest. He didn't want to be the one who looked soft. And so he followed. Late that night, they caught Sarah outside as she was heading back from the laundry room. There were few lights and nobody else was around. Before she could react, Riker grabbed her arms. Turner pulled her wrist behind her, and Gomez shoved her back against a steel pole used for outdoor flag ceremonies. Holt hesitated, but reluctantly helped tie her arms behind the pole with rough rope. The wind cut across the open training field, freezing her exposed fingers. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She stood silent. Her breath slowed. Gomez leaned close to her ear. "You don't belong here." Riker smirked. "Let's see how tough you are in the cold." They walked away, laughing. The barracks door shut behind them. The field fell silent, except for the wind. Sarah closed her eyes. It wasn't the first time she had been bound. She had experienced far worse in combat zones, but never at the hands of her own teammates. She wondered whether to break the cord herself. She could. It wasn't difficult, but she also wanted to see how far they were willing to go. Some lessons needed to be taught, and the universe had ways of making sure they unfolded at the right moment. Inside the barracks, the four troublemakers felt triumphant. To them, this was just hazing. Something harmless. A joke that would teach her not to act superior. Holt sat silently on his bunk, guilt beginning to eat at him. He had a younger sister. He imagined her tied outside in the cold. Suddenly, nothing felt funny. Meanwhile, miles away, a black SUV cut across the access road toward the base. Inside sat General Marcus Reed. His uniform held no flamboyant medals, yet every soldier in Special Operations knew his name. He was Delta Force, one of the most respected leaders in modern military history. He rarely visited training bases in person. But tonight, he was there for a personal reason. He had come to check on his newest, undercover asset. Sarah Nolan was not just a decorated operator. She was one of Delta's most capable mission planners and had recently been assigned a covert evaluation mission, infiltrate a regular Army training environment, assess leadership culture, and identify weaknesses in unit discipline. She had full authority to operate without revealing who she was. General Reed wanted first-hand observation, not reports distorted by fear or favoritism. No one at the base, not even the command staff, knew her true assignment, but General Reed was the kind of leader who didn't just read reports. He saw things for himself. And tonight, he had decided to make a surprise visit. General Reed parked in silence and stepped out into the frigid air. The wind cut across the open parade field. Then he stopped. His eyes narrowed. In the distance, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A woman, alone, hands tied behind a steel pole. He moved fast. Sarah heard the footsteps. She opened her eyes as he approached. Their eyes met briefly. No words were needed. He loosened the rope with a swift tug and removed it from her wrists. Her skin was reddened, but she stood tall and composed. "Are you all right, Captain?" He asked quietly. She nodded. They did this. Reed asked. Yes. He breathed slowly. A calm man, but anger like molten iron filled his chest. The wind whipped across the field as he spoke. "Where are they?" Sarah nodded toward the barracks. Reed turned and began walking. Sarah followed, hands still stiff from the cold, but she walked without hesitation. The barracks door slammed open as the general entered without knocking. Soldiers inside snapped upright instinctively. Some recognized him instantly. Others' senses ranked by the shift in the room's energy. Riker, Turner, Gomez, and Holt sat on their bunks. Holt immediately stood, regret written across his face. The others took their time rising. Riker laughed behind his breath. The general's voice was low. "I need the four of you in formation, now. Nobody dare question." They lined up. 30 other soldiers peeked through curtains or stood frozen, unsure what was happening. General Reed stepped aside, revealing Sarah. She stood quietly, eyes fixed forward. The whisper that spread through the barracks felt like lightning. Riker swallowed. Turner's smirk vanished. Gomez blinked in disbelief. General Reed let the silence burn before speaking. "Do any of you understand who you tied to a pole tonight?" Nobody answered. Reed turned slightly towards Sarah. Captain Nolan, introduce yourself. Gasps spread through the barracks. Holt's eyes widened. Riker stepped back without meaning to. Turner felt his chest tighten. Gomez forgot to breathe. Reed continued. Captain Sarah Nolan, Delta Force, one of the highest-rated officers we have trained in 15 years. And tonight, 4 of my soldiers thought it appropriate to humiliate her, not knowing who she was, not caring who she might have been. Then he looked at the entire room, but this was never about her rank. This was about character. Riker tried to speak. Sir, it was just Reed cut him off. No, it was never just a joke. It was cruelty. It was insecurity. It was weakness disguised as strength. And you tied a soldier to a pole in freezing weather because you thought she wouldn't speak up. Because you believed silence meant fear. His eyes sharpened. What you didn't understand is that true professionals don't need to shout to prove themselves. Then he looked back at Sarah. Captain Nolan, you may proceed. Every soldier in the room stiffened. They expected shouting, fury, vengeance. Instead, Sarah spoke calmly. I was not angry. I was disappointed. Not because of what was done to me, but because of what it says about this unit. I have been in places where soldiers relied on each other to survive. I have seen people risk their lives for teammates they barely knew. And yet here, 4 men believed strengthening a unit meant breaking down one of their own. She let the words settle in. You thought I was beneath you. The truth is, nobody in this room is beneath anyone else. Rank does not make you valuable. Character does. Integrity does. How you treat the quietest person in the room defines the entire team. Riker's eyes dropped to the floor. Turner stared at the wall. Holt's shoulders fell. Gomez's fingers trembled. Sarah continued. I didn't reveal who I was because I needed to see how you treated someone when there was nothing to gain from respecting them. And now I have seen. Reed stepped forward once more. This barracks will follow new standards effective immediately. Anyone caught humiliating, hazing, or demeaning another soldier will be removed from this installation. Training is hard enough without turning on each other. We build warriors, not bullies. He turned to the 4 men. You may redeem yourselves. That decision will not be made with words. It will be made with discipline, humility, and a different kind of strength than the one you tried to show tonight. Then he addressed the entire room. Let this be a reminder. Every soldier has a story. Every uniform carries battles you know nothing about. And the quietest person in the room may very well be the one who saves your life. Someday. Sarah and the general stepped outside. The wind calmed slightly. Sarah looked across the field where she had stood tied earlier. Reed spoke with quiet pride. I knew sending you here was the right decision. She nodded. Sometimes the hardest battle isn't downrange. It's right here. Reed looked at her. Are you staying? Yes. They still need someone who leads by example. He nodded, a small smile showing in the corner of his mouth. Then teach them what leadership really looks like. Over the next months, the atmosphere of the base changed. Soldiers spoke to one another with more respect. They trained harder, not to destroy each other, but to push one another. Hope became one of Sarah's strongest supporters, and later confessed his shame from that night. The others worked to earn back the trust they had broken. Some succeeded. Some learned their limitations. And Sarah? She continued her mission, quiet, humble, strong. She never mentioned her rank again. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke for her, because true leadership never demands attention. It earns it. In the end, her presence reminded everyone of a truth soldiers often forget. Courage isn't measured by volume. Respect isn't claimed by intimidation. And strength isn't proven by breaking others down. It is proven by lifting others up. When the next deployment came, the unit was no longer fractured. It was ready, and many credited the transformation not to speeches or punishments, but to one silent figure who showed them what integrity looked like when tested in darkness. What did this story make you feel? Where are you watching from? Subscribe to Soul Relief Stories for more real stories that heal the heart.